This video is brought to you by Squarespace.
A couple years ago, I randomly decided to buy a Super 8 camera. I was like 15 years old. I never shot a film camera before, but I saw some Super 8 footage online and thought I should try it out. And at the time, there wasn't really a good guide on how to shoot Super 8 film. I had to figure this thing out by myself, looking at forums and online manuals. There are some really cool ones out there today, but I thought it would still be cool to talk about how to shoot on Super 8 film and my experience shooting with it. I'll start right away with talking about the camera. The one I own is a Canon 518 Super Zoom. This was from the 1960s and it was kind of like the home movie or vacation camera. This isn't a serious movie camera, but it still works really well. Prices on cameras have gone up a ton, so I recommend if you're in the market for a Super 8 camera, you check out local flea markets or even check out your grandparents' place, because I've seen a ton of people who still have these lying around. These things basically never break, and for nostalgic reasons, a lot of people don't get rid of them. So before you go out and spend $100 or more on a Super 8 camera on eBay, make sure you check out some local spots first. But if you are ready to purchase one, there's a couple things you should look out for. Obviously, if you can find one that's film tested, that's great. Those tend to cost a little bit more, but it's definitely worth the money buying a film tested camera as opposed to buying one that doesn't work and only finding out when you get your footage back. And if you're not buying a film tested camera, the main thing to look out for is that the motor on the camera runs. This is usually the part of the camera that breaks first, so if you can find one with a running motor that's been tested, it's usually a pretty safe bet. Any home movie camera like this Canon 518 or any similar models will usually work pretty well. It's got auto zooming features on the side, which I never used, but you can get that really nice home zoom. It does have auto exposure and it has a really nice zoom lens, and that's kind of the two main things that I wanted in a Super 8 camera. These cameras are super minimal, and once you get them running and working properly, it's really super simple to film with one of these. These kinds of cameras were made for parents and not necessarily for filmmakers, and once you get it running properly, it's basically just about finding something cool to film. In terms of color film, which I recommend that you shoot with this camera, there's basically two main options. You can get slide film. Kodak recently brought back Kodak Ektachrome for Super 8, and this is an example of a slide film. I recommend you only shoot slide film if you plan on playing your movie through a projector. If you don't plan on projecting your movie, definitely go with color negative film because it has much more latitude than slide film, and if you're just gonna end up digitizing the footage anyway, you're gonna get much finer grained footage with nicer colors as well with color negative film. There's a couple options you can go with. I recommend checking out Kodak's daylight balanced films. You get this in a 50 ISO or a 250 ISO film, and the letter at the end just stands for daylight balanced. There's also tungsten balanced, which I don't recommend you get unless you're gonna be filming in tungsten light, because this film naturally has a much more blue look than daylight balanced film. And the 50 and 250D stocks are really great. They both have really nice grain, and just depending on whether you want to shoot inside or outside, go with the lower or the higher sensitivity film.
Before we continue, let me take a quick second to thank this week's sponsor, which is Squarespace. I've had my portfolio on Squarespace for over 2 years, and everything from their incredibly simple and customizable templates to the 24/7 online customer support has made it incredibly easy to not only showcase my work, but also continually keep it updated. Head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Willem to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain.
Buying the camera and the film is one thing, but getting your camera to run properly is a whole nother thing. This camera takes a couple different batteries. Most cameras are very similar to this, but mine takes 3 AA's in the top part of the camera. This is for the motor and the main operations of the camera. It also takes a single AA in the grip of the camera. You'll know the camera is working when your motor is running and when you can see the light meter needle in the viewfinder moving around when you point it at different bright or dark subjects. There's also this incredible little battery checker on the side where you push the button and a needle will tell you how far depleted that the batteries are. The last thing you need to be aware of to get this thing running is the auto exposure or manual exposure features. My camera has a switch on the side for manual exposure, but it's more like a dial and it's not very easy to be precise with. I actually ended up hot gluing my camera down into the auto exposure mode because I always ended up flicking this thing to some manual exposure without knowing when my thumb was kind of resting on the grip over here. So a little bit of hot glue just made sure that it stays in auto exposure. Once you get everything running, you obviously compose your shot through the viewfinder back here on the camera. It's not that bright, it's pretty small, but you're looking through the lens of the camera and it's really a fun experience to compose shots with this thing. The focus on these cameras doesn't change as you zoom in or out, so it makes sense to zoom in, focus, and then recompose by zooming out. Loading the film is done by just opening the compartment on the side and dropping in your film cartridge. What's cool is that all the film cartridges that Kodak is making are daylight loading cartridges, so you can put them in and out of the camera at any time and it won't ruin your footage. If you want to switch film stocks halfway through a roll, you can simply swap out the cartridges because they're safe to load in daylight. The cost of shooting Super 8 film is generally not cheap. The film starts at $25 and goes upwards from there. Once you're done shooting the film, you have to send it off to get developed and scanned, which then is probably going to be around another $25. On a typical Super 8 cartridge, you get just over 3 minutes of footage if you're shooting at 18 FPS, which is the standard frame rate for Super 8. Once you send off your film, it's just a matter of waiting for the lab to email you your footage and return the actual film. And then you can enjoy some beautiful Super 8 grainy footage that was shot last month but feels like it was years ago. You can check out my Super 8 films I've made. I'll link them in the description. And if you have any questions, feel free to hit me up in the comments or on Instagram. My Instagram is @WillemVerb. That's it for this video. Peace.